In this topic, we're going to now transition from what's happening outside of a firm to what's happening inside of a firm. And to do that, we begin with one of the classic concepts in strategic management, the value chain, which is simple, but I think important and complex. Then we're going to talk about how you do an internal analysis. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold this morning. And then how you build resource or bundle resources together to create sustainable competitive advantages. And then I'm going to close with trying to give you a little bit of a personal application. So here's the value chain. It's classic, coined by who else? Michael Porter. And you've probably seen it before, and it's relatively simple. It talks about what is it that goes into a firm. In Porter combined the idea of primary activities and support activities, which you can argue is a bit pejorative and probably is. And then we're going to talk about some of our activities, whether that terminology is helpful, unhelpful, as we transition into different types of firms, service versus manufacturing, knowledge versus more of the old school. But it's a great starting point. These are the things a firm does. Here's why I think this is complicated. Increasingly in the modern economy, firms are doing less of the things on that chart and are relying on outsourcing or contracting or alliances or whatever term you want to use more and more. So I think one of the pivotal questions in strategy has become, what do I need to do versus what do I have other people do? The term is outsourcing, and that carries a very negative connotation because outsourcing in 21st century America implies sending the work over to a low-cost country and putting Americans out of work. And that certainly is true to a certain extent. But let's kind of strip the emotion away, look at it from a strategic standpoint and say, outsourcing really isn't anything new. For decades, companies have hired lawyers outside their firm to do work for them. In many cases, many small companies, even medium-sized companies, don't have any legal staff whatsoever. When they have legal work that needs to be done, they contract it out to a lawyer. That's outsourcing. Think of all of the accounting firms that exist. Again, outsourcing, as these companies have turned to outside accounting experts to help them with their accounting functions. Advertising, huge advertising agencies in major metropolitan areas and in small markets like Wichita Falls. What are they advertising? Themselves? No. They are doing work for clients. So you can see that's where a company has outsourced at least some of its marketing function. Now the theory is that this generates customer value because it allows other people to do what they do best while we stick to what we do best. But sometimes that can be a pretty core function, seemingly. Here's an example. Don't know how many of you still own a Toshiba laptop. They're still popular and very highly rated. But if you have a Toshiba laptop and you send it away for repair, Toshiba does not repair it. And if I gave you 100 guesses, I bet you couldn't tell me who it is that does repair it. The answer is UPS. What? UPS? When Toshiba did an analysis, the thing that customers complained the most about was the length of time it takes to get the laptop back to them. Makes sense. I mean, if your laptop is your brain, the longer it's away from you, the worse it is. And so they determined that fixing a laptop is actually a pretty cut and dried thing. If the part's not working, you take it out, you put it back in, Viola, there you have it. What takes up a lot of the time is the transportation. So they turn to a logistics transportation expert, that would be UPS, to help them solve the problem. They located the repair facility right at Louisville, or UPS's worldwide air hub in Louisville, Kentucky. And in the process, they cut the repair time in half as measured by from the time it left the customer until it got back to the customer. Bingo, customer value. And they did it cheaper because UPS basically didn't have any incentive to up-price a bunch of the logistics work. In theory, it's more flexible because you're handling these functions by contract. We'll talk about that. It's less costly, maybe. Usually this is where the outsourcing to a low-cost country comes in. And it's less risky because you don't have the responsibility on the books. So if you have a downturn or something, you can cut it off. Well, what's the reality? A lot of cases, outsourcing doesn't meet the expectations it's set to achieve. Why not? It's because the cost issue dominates all the rest. A company's desire to cut cost cause them to cut back on other things. Rather than being more flexible, it becomes less flexible. Why? Your manufacturing or the function is located half a world away. You have communications difficulties, you have in-transit issues, and there's a lot that happens that you simply cannot see. And then it's less risky until it becomes more risky because you've lost control of the quality. Several years ago, some American toy makers had a disaster on their hands when their toys were discovered to have lead paint in them, which is a huge taboo. How did that happen? Well, they had Chinese manufacturers for these toys. They did not have the huge taboo over lead paint. Lead paint was cheaper. I think you can connect the dots from there. So by outsourcing that function, the company, instead of getting less risk, actually got more risk. So now this becomes, ask the question that you know where I'm going with this because I'm asking the question, are the skills to outsource effectively different than the skills to do the function in-house effectively? Obviously, I think so. You've got to worry about negotiating, monitoring the quality of the manufacturer, managing the relationship. These are different skill sets than it is to simply make it in-house. But again, I want to remove the emotional baggage of the outsourcing mindset and say, increasingly, firms are choosing to stick to some things they think they do very well. For example, a lot of startups today, they design it, they market it, they sell it, they do not make it. They rely on Chinese manufacturers or other, now increasingly less Chinese manufacturers. And now as costs rise in China and in other places around the world, and the transportation costs have increased, the price difference between local or closer to home manufacturing and outsourced manufacturing get less. So that's going to be something firms are going to have to manage as well. We're now going to move into the next phase, which is look at resources and how they are put together to create a competitive advantage. Join me then.